Welcome, Carolina Thread Trail friends. We picked a beautiful day to have you guys out on a virtual walk with us on Boiling Creek in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. This is a really beautiful creek that has a very popular section of trail on it. Some of the trail has been paved and some of it hasn't. So it's a good opportunity to look at what those choices do for water quality and the environment on these trails. You can see here that this is a sewer easement, very close proximity to the creek there. We have a pretty steep hill that comes down. Water crosses the trail and then goes right into the creek on this section of trail. You can also see it's a fairly wide section of earth trail here. You can see this kid rides his bike by, and then the folks behind him, there are actually 3 people on 3 different paths back there. And that's because there's not a defined area. You can see it again here. You have this woman who's walking on the right-hand side, and we've got some more people who are going to come on the left-hand side. What happens is when you have a trail like this, you've got a mud puddle or an obstacle, and people find their way around it, and the trail just gets wider and wider and wider. So let's talk to Rebecca Stubbs, who's also here with us today. Rebecca is going to give us her impressions of this trail. So Rebecca, I'm interested in, as a stream restoration professional and water resources expert, when you see this trail, what do you see?
So what I tend to look for is, where are the low spots, where is water? You always want to think about where water is coming from as it crosses the trail. Often trails are set up so that you're walking along the topography that it's that is along.
Not very good at social.
Oh, it's
all right.
Good. He's friendly. Trails a lot of times are running alongside and along a similar contour. Grades tend to be fairly gentle, intentionally so, and so that can often make it more challenging for stormwater to either flow across or ends up flowing along. And so just generally speaking, in trails, regardless of surface, you do want to be mindful of what those flow patterns are in very local situations. So when they come next to streams, the biggest thing from a stream perspective that we want to look at is, where are those concentrated points that water eventually goes over the bank and into the channel. But lots of water anywhere can be very destructive. So being very mindful of where it enters the channel and making sure that it's not ever too much at one time.
And then ideally, when we're looking at a scenario like this where we have water coming down a steep hill, would we be looking for a buffer of some kind, of vegetated buffer?
So yes, vegetated buffers are one of nature's best ways to stabilize surfaces, to hold soil in place, but then also can provide some of that roughness that also slows down water. So it naturally provides, speed bump of sorts as water transitions from a smoother surface or a bare soil surface into a vegetated buffer. So buffers are another, very important piece of this. If there are ways to, keep water in a sheet flow form through vegetation, that's definitely the most ideal situation.
And then when we look at a trail like this that has a lot of kind of raw earth, what does that do to the stream when the water comes down the hill and across a raw earth?
Yeah. So since, we can see areas where there isn't much vegetation along the trail, it receives a lot of traffic. The intent is that it's not really, the trail itself is not intended to be vegetated, so that there's an apparent pathway for pedestrians, bikes, what have you. So whenever that becomes exposed, concentrated water just wants to take that soil away with it. And so that ultimately ends up, can be a contributing source of sediment within your stream channel. In addition to whatever may come off the banks whenever it enters through that.
And then we hear about the word turbidity in streams, and that turbidity is a bad thing.
Yes. So turbidity can be very detrimental to a lot of in-channel habitat and in-channel macroinvertebrates, which are a lot of what are good water quality indicators. And so as soon as we get more sediment in there, there's not as much light, which they need to either grow the vegetation that they feed upon or just for them to sustain life. And so generally speaking, the clearer the water, the better quality it is. But yeah, sediment is definitely a detriment to that.
So is there a link between a raw earth trail right next to a stream like this and turbidity?
Yeah, I think there could be. If you've got, especially in this situation where you do have a pretty steep hill on the away from the stream side of the trail, or on the upland side of the trail, that can promote a lot faster runoff. So stormwater runoff running across this bare earth trail and into the channel would be, conditions are ripe for sediment to enter the stream channel. So right here is a spot you can kind of see the bank is coming straight and then it dips out towards the trail here. There's no real vegetation. There's some, grass and moss present, but a lot of this is likely due to drainage that's coming down from this hill right here and then is just entering this channel right at this point. If we're kind of looking at localized grades, it does look like this is a little bit of a sag in the trail as well, so you can sort of see what that lowland concentrated flow entering the channel can do here. And so this is something where the vegetation is gone because it's probably been washed away repeatedly over time. So this is what you want to watch out for.
So this is still Boiling Creek, but now we're on the paved section of Chapel Hills Greenway. And Graham and I actually designed, this is one of several sections, and we designed this section. You can see that it's very similar. We've got the sewer there on the left-hand side, very close proximity to the creek. We armored this downstream or this downhill side of the trail here to protect it and to let some vegetation grow up. And we're threading the needle. There's that giant rock there on your left-hand side. There was a lot of rock on this project. So some pretty tough constraints. So I'm going to invite you along to eavesdrop on the conversation that Rebecca and I were having as we were checking out the trail.
Similar to stream or flood, stormwater. Yeah.
So here's our sewer. We're actually we're right on top of the sewer line with this project. So this is a sealed manhole, which allows the utilities to come in here and get to it if they need it. But we don't have two separate utility and trail corridors, alignments that are taking up space in the buffer.
And since the utility maintenance will require, heavier traffic loading that otherwise might be in a natural easement surface, providing this paved surface.
So Rebecca, what do you think of this solution here where we're using...
This was an area of the trail that's more confined and where it could be located. And so I think use of the riprap right at the edge to ensure that this bank would be stabilized was a good use of rock here to ensure that as water is sheet flowing off of the smooth surface of the concrete, it's hitting rock prior to entering the channel. So this is what would help prevent some of the bank erosion as water is going over top of the bank and into the stream.
Awesome. Okay.
So here's another spot where we've got a low point sag in the trail, and we can see where water has concentrated here and is entering the channel where we just showed. This is a similar spot that we pointed out on the natural surface trail previously, and so you can see water acts in a similar manner, but here we've got a better stand of vegetation. Where I'm standing right now, not as thick as we would like, but as it's going into the channel, we do see a lot more vegetation there that's holding that soil in place, and then some rock down below that's protecting that bank. So this is your concentrated entry points into the channel are always what you want to be mindful of, and make sure that you're seeding those, planting them, and just making sure that those areas are stable, because that's where the most erosion is going to happen as water comes off of any trail and into the stream. So the section that we're looking at here behind me is a good example of, trying to keep as much of that riparian area as you can. So as much vegetation, hardwoods are good. They've got deep roots that'll hold and anchor that bank together. And then the shorter ground cover is also an important part, and that's where you're going to get most of your nutrient uptake. Sediment fallout is going to be through the grass and the herbaceous plants there, but maintaining as much buffer between the edge of your trail and the stream bank is critical and important, and that's kind of the ideal situation.
Let's talk about how we achieve that vegetation right up to the edge of the trail that Rebecca was talking about. And we do that by creating very stable shoulders for our trail and seeding back all the way up to that. We're going to take a look at a couple of examples on this trail. There are a couple of different segments, and one has really good stone shoulders on it and stable vegetation. Then we're going to take a look at another one that doesn't have that same
We also want to
stability.
talk about the shoulder here. So this shoulder is actually a constructed shoulder.
Oh, okay.
So this is 2 feet of stone, and then you seed back up to the edge of it. So you're immediately getting vegetation right up to the edge of the trail.
And often the most common place where you would expect to see erosion beginning is just off the trail surface itself.
Right. So shoulders are incredibly important.
Yep.
You can see in this shoulder we've got nice vegetation all along the edge here. So as soon as that water leaves the trail, it's being treated.
And the vegetation is helping slow down the runoff as well, so that it's not corrosive. And you can see this is in good stand.
So this is the same trail, but this section of trail was designed without the 2-foot shoulder. So you can see here it was formed up, and then we just have bare earth here. In the section we showed you earlier, we have 2 feet of stone built up to the edge of the trail, and then we seed right up to it, so we get vegetation right to the edge of the trail. This is also problematic from a shoulder point of view because on a bike it's easy to get off this steep curve, it's easy to roll your ankle, so make sure when you're designing either asphalt or concrete trails that you are including that 2-foot stone shoulder. It's going to help you both from water quality, safety, and protecting the life of your trail, especially with asphalt. It protects the edge of your trail and you get a lot more life out of your trail.
So hopefully that's given you a little glimpse into some of the design challenges we're trying to balance when we're designing close to streams. If you can avoid being this close to a stream, you certainly should. And I think as a community, we need to be investing in projects so that we can afford to buy high and dry ground. But in a lot of cases, we're still dealing with corridors like this, where it is wet and there are challenges with it. So I think intuitively, sometimes we think that if you're going to be this close to a stream, that a natural surface is going to have better outcomes for water quality. What the reality, though, is that the way that water behaves when we have an unstable surface like bare earth, it really does make it very difficult for any type of vegetative buffer to take hold. The users on the trail are adding to that with the mechanical wear and tear on the surface that is keeping vegetation from growing up. So by controlling where people are in the corridor, we limit the impact that they have on the corridor, and it allows vegetation to come back up and start treating the water as soon as it crosses the paved surface. So a lot to think about. And I hope that this has been helpful to you. And as always, we at McAdams are here to help you solve problems like this. And we're very happy to be with Carolina Thread Trail, our great friends over many years today. Thank you.